The rising of food prices in 2007 to 2008, accompanied by the energy and financial crisis, put millions of people in the world's poorest countries at extreme risk from hunger and malnutrition. In several countries, hunger riots were breaking out. In response to this food crisis, €1 billion have been earmarked for the EU Food Facility Programme, which is to last 3 years and support projects in the 50 most affected countries by high prices. This programme aims to counter the malnutrition that is currently striking hundreds of millions of people, to increase agricultural production and facilitate access to food.
Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let the moderation be made known.
In Europe today, most citizens do not have to worry about where the next meal will come from. Food products are available almost everywhere at affordable prices. In the rest of the world, and in developing countries in particular, the situation is naturally very different. Agriculture is still the main activity. Obtaining food is of prime concern and is the main household expenditure, up to 80% compared to around 13% on average in Europe. These two families living in a small village in Mazabuka district in the southwest of Zambia can relate to that. It's 2 p.m, time for the traditional communal meal. A moment of conviviality and sharing. A moment that binds the generations. Also the moment for the village elders to share their stories of the past. But for the past few years, the gods must have been in a very deep sleep. In 2007 to 2008, the worldwide food crisis struck the inhabitants of the village head-on, as it did with many Zambians. This food crisis was due at first to short-term causes, price volatility and speculation in the food and energy markets, and sky-high oil prices. There were also structural causes such as demographic growth and increased demand for food, declining of world food stocks and agricultural investments, increasing demand for meat and dairy products, urban growth, water scarcity and climate change. In Zambia, the price of fertilizers has risen by 50%. The price of maize, the staple food, has risen by 25%. In a country where 1 in 2 people suffer from malnutrition, where agriculture is for many a subsistence activity, the impact of this crisis has been dreadful. Fortunately today, Patrick and his community managed to get enough to eat. One explanation for this improvement is that they now use conservation agriculture. Like 200,000 other small-scale farmers in Zambia, they've been trained in this technique. It's based on 3 principles: minimal soil disturbance, maintenance of a permanent organic soil cover, and crop rotation. This training program is largely financed by the European Union in the framework of its Food Facility Programme, and is implemented with the help of the Zambia Farmers Union and the FAO, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization.
What we are trying to do is to minimize disturbance of the soil while building up the fertility of the soil and also maintaining agronomic practices which help us come up with a timely planted crop, light plant population and judicious use of nutrients so that we have maximum yield.
The use of this simple technique, which requires little in terms of equipment and which respects local traditions, seems to be bearing fruit. They're even hoping to produce a surplus that they can sell on the market and thus bring in a small income. Munsanye has also benefited from this type of training. She's become a real expert in conservation agriculture, a method that allows her to produce more while spending less time in the fields.
So ndakajana kuti chibotu maningi even reaping itself nimbotu maningi kunyina chimbibi achiruvide winda chibotu winda wawo ngamunya mapo mali aya mapope mali amapope aya twagula tuyakuchikonya kwamba kutete ningona manina aya mapope aya kutulira yona ya ma inputs ngotwerere utuberehe ngani kamboka kuti kaitwa bona kale utwa babutebuzi ko kuti twerede kuti tujane iyakubereha yeso nopesi mukwini tujiromba kuti tujiriba nini soga bajitukwa burula alimu.
These inputs are another facet of the European cooperation program that improves her daily life. Like thousands of other farmers, she receives tokens to exchange for seeds, fertilizers, herbicides and basic tools. This is a concrete and essential aid, for these products are expensive for populations that are in need of everything. The situation in Zambia is gradually improving. However, it will still take a lot of work and effort and require a lot of external support to ensure the food security of Zambian citizens. Given its great agricultural potential, the country is on the right track and can look forward to a happier future.
Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let moderation be made known to all men, and again I say rejoice.
Europe is not only active in Zambia. All over the world, under the Food Facility, the EU works in strong association with partners on the field by promoting the involvement of the civil society and co-financing projects of NGOs, grassroots organizations, UN agencies, member states and partner countries. Beneficiaries of the program are estimated to be over 50 million people. Kurban lives with his mother, Beauty, and their family in southern Bangladesh. In 2007, the few possessions they had were swept away by the cyclone Sidir. Since then, they've been struggling to survive, hindered by poor rice harvests, their sole source of income and subsistence. This family is not an isolated case. 2/3 of Bangladeshis are farmers, and this type of ordeal, this constant precariousness, is their daily lot. With 150 million citizens and over 1,000 inhabitants per square kilometre, Bangladesh is the most densely populated country in the world. This reality is complicated by its geographical location. The country is situated on the delta formed by two big rivers, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, and bordered by the Indian Ocean. Each year, it's a victim of intense flooding followed by periods of drought, all of which have devastating consequences in one of the poorest countries on our planet. And these phenomena are being accentuated by climate change.
Now, there are really erratic rainfall. When it is supposed to be raining, it's not. Therefore, they are experiencing a lot of problems with their agricultural yielding. And also, due to the climate change, the river is becoming more unpredictable. It is eroding the areas frequently.
Crops and even entire villages are swept away by flooding rivers and hurricanes. Even when the country is spared by the storms, the seawater regularly encroaches on farming land. This seriously hampers the growing of rice, their staple food, and makes the water undrinkable.
মহিলাদের এই ধরনের বিভিন্ন সমস্যা আরো লবণ জল খাইলেও বিভিন্ন রকম কীটনাশক অসুবিধাও দেখা দেয় তারপরে আমাদের ধরেন ডায়রিয়া হয় এই লবণ জলে তো ডায়রিয়া অনবরত লোকের থাকে আর ধরেন গর্ভবতী মায়েকে ওই লবণ পানি খাওয়ালে তার বাচ্চাটারও পজিশনটা খারাপ হয়ে যায় তাই এইভাবে আমাদের এলাকায় তো বিভিন্ন রকম সমস্যা হয় মহিলা হিসাবে অনেক নির্যাতন আমাদের ভোগ করতে হয়
Though it is true that women are particularly vulnerable, they're not the only ones who suffer. Malnutrition, disease, and extreme poverty remain complex problems to address. Several actions have been launched by the Food Facility Programme. In partnership with the World Food Programme, it finances, among other things, the building of embankments. This has a double objective, to try and prevent the flooding, but also to provide income to very poor families. Here in Joyka, in the south of the country, 600 people are involved in preventing salt water from getting into the fields.
আমরা এই রাস্তাটা দেয়াতে আমাকে এই পুরো ফ্যামিলি সহ সবাই আমরা এটা রক্ষা পাওয়ার জন্য আর এই ধান ফান ভালো হয় সেজন্য আমরা এই উপকারটা হওয়ার জন্য এই কাজকর্ম আরো আসে যাতে তাইতে আমরা আরো ভালো হতে চাই
Shapla has received cattle through the intermediary of a local NGO supported by the programme. She intends to sell the animal on in a few months, which will provide her with a little money for new investments and, she hopes, a better future.
এতে দিয়ে গরু ছাগল ভেড়া ছাগল হাঁস মুরগি এগুলো কিনব খাবার তিন বেলা খেতে পারি না
Like other beneficiaries, Shapla has also received basic training on how the local market and cattle trade operate.
শুধু সম্পদ বিতরণ না সম্পদ বিতরণের সাথে সাথে তারা যাতে নিজেদেরকে কিভাবে উন্নয়ন করতে পারে এবং প্রশিক্ষণের মাধ্যমে এবং সম্পদটাকে কিভাবে সুষ্ঠুভাবে ব্যবহার করে একটা সম্পদ থেকে আরো বেশি সম্পদ তারা তৈরি করতে পারে নিজেরা নিজেদের চিন্তা ভাবনা চেতনা দিয়ে এবং নিজেরা জানতে পারে শিখতে পারে নিজেদের মানে আমরা কি আবার নিজের পজিশন অবস্থানটা জানতে পারে
The Bangladeshis are facing great challenges. They must adapt to climate events and set up the structures that will help to reduce their impact. Here, as is the case in all its projects, the Food Facility Programme contributes to helping people in need to get access to food, fighting poverty and hunger.
El primer madre de este mundo pero después lo voy a indicar. Cuando empezó, juntó las 4 maíces, granó y lo puso en una olla, echó en la olla. En el vapor salieron 4 varones. Por eso hoy en día hay personas colorado. El árbol, el cielo, las estrellas, la luna, y nosotros somos los cuidadores de ellos.
This legend comes from the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Mayan civilization. According to this ancestral myth from Guatemala, man was created from grains of maize. And maize remains symbolic today, as this plant still constitutes the staple diet in these regions. Here, religion, culture and farming are inseparably intertwined.
Con todo respeto, en esta mañana estamos en este lugar para iniciar la ceremonia. La ceremonia es para inaugurar el proyecto de seguridad alimentario.
Como en el Popol Vuh dice, nosotros somos el chip. Kuy banumak kisach banumak makot bakinya chiwe, rish namam, rish wutit, rish qih, rish sak, rish benak, rish lakhnakwi, chikyo banumak, arewa wan qihri, arewa wikilal, arewa rinchmilash, arewa wan binwal wan waqtubas, kim bin churu wuchulew, kim brirwa, kin takakwa, kin slipsanwa, churu wuchulew.
Oscar and Alexandra stand out among the local farmers. They're not tourists, they work for Oikos, a Portuguese NGO funded by the program and initiators of a food security project in the north of Guatemala. Hemmed in by the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, Guatemala, with over 14 million inhabitants, is the most densely populated country in Central America. Felipe is 48. He's one of the beneficiaries of the program launched by Oikos. He lives with his wife, his children and his grandchildren in a remote hamlet in the middle of the mountains. They live in 2 groups of dilapidated huts and struggle to survive.
Siempre nos quedamos escasos de comida, no digamos de dinero, que siempre el dinero nos hace falta, que no hay dónde ganar aquí. Muy escaso el trabajo, no tenemos dónde ir a ganar con la gente. Si es que casi la mayoría, todos somos pobres.
In Guatemala, over half the population lives below the poverty line. In indigenous regions, the percentage is often even higher. Felipe does have a small field where he grows maize and beans, but since he only gets 1 crop a year, the produce he harvests is just enough, when all goes well, to feed his family. And these 2 plants are not sufficient to provide all the required nutrients. It may not be immediately obvious, but these children are suffering from malnutrition. Felipe's youngest daughter, for example, Jessica, is 3, but she's the same size as his nephew, who's just 18 months old. They're suffering from serious deficiencies and the development is being stunted. To try to alleviate this situation, Oikos, assisted by local partners, goes into the most remote villages.
Ayer cuando estuvimos aquí nos mencionaron que eran los primeros extranjeros que veían. Procuramos llegar donde no llega nadie y donde las necesidades, porque no hay servicios o porque hay poco acceso a las zonas urbanas, podamos tener un mayor impacto, ¿no?, con nuestras acciones. Buenas, ¿cómo están?
In these remote areas, they give out advice and distribute seeds.
Este es el rábano. Este es el brócoli también, que le va a tocar una medida a cada uno. También tenemos lo que es los huicoítos, que ya sabemos, ¿va?, que el huicoíto es de bastante vitamina para uno, tiene muchos nutrientes.
Sí, porque realmente con esto pues vamos a tener la oportunidad de tener muchas verduras, ¿verdad? Y ya como a mejorar mejor nuestra vida, tanto de nosotros como de los niños.
Thousands of other small-scale farmers in Guatemala need help. Here too, the food crisis and climate phenomena have already made precarious lives worse. Farmers have to adapt to these difficulties by diversifying their production, improving the productivity of their land and reducing costs. It's no coincidence that these are the objectives of a European Union aid program aimed at thousands of small farmers. Maria and her husband have been chosen to promote the project. They're participating in training courses. They've notably learned how to diversify their food supply thanks to a vegetable plot and fruit trees, and how to install a water filter and improve their crop storage. In turn, they passed on these best practices to other families in their community.
Sí, funcionó muy bien porque de ahí ya todas las vecinas que aquí nos rodea, vaya, tienen sus... En que no demasiado, pero tienen más o menos sus verduritas, todo ahí para su sustento diario, pues, porque antes no teníamos eso, porque éramos como algo ignorantes, pues, que no sabíamos cómo utilizar el poco recurso que ahí había, pues.
Today, Marvin, an FAO technician, has come to tell Alnufo, Maria's husband, and 2 other promoters about the use of organic fertilizer from composting.
Mucho gusto. Qué bueno que están por aquí.
Sí, por aquí.
Mucha agua.
Sí.
Si ustedes se dan cuenta, utilizando ese tipo de abono nos ahorramos dinero. Y lo mejor es que mejoramos o apoyamos para cuidar el medio ambiente. Pesa mucho. Sí, hombre. Poquito. Pero va, qué buena práctica, vos. Agarramos un buen puño y ya lo aplicamos al maíz. Otra cosa, sabemos de que el químico lo vamos a aplicar en la parte de arriba. Sí, sí. Si lo aplicamos aquí, ¿qué pasa?
La pesa la para abajo, no aprovecha la plantita.
Lo aprovecha el zacatillo, las malas hierbas que están aquí, ¿va? Todo aquí, la idea es aplicarlo, digamos, un tipo como semiplateadito aquí.
Increasing agricultural production and productivity is crucial, but that alone is not sufficient. To ensure food security, work must also be done on other levels. It has become a familiar sight in San Pedro Yocopilas, as it has in 136 other municipalities. There are no hospitals or health centres in this region. Pediatric consultations are held here during monthly gatherings, organised with the support of the Food Facility Programme. Andrea and her 2 youngest children, Gloria and Victor, are here in the crowd. The 2 children are first weighed and then measured. This information is carefully recorded. It will allow their development to be followed and help to detect any abnormalities.
No es un tratamiento, sino que es un programa preventivo, porque la desnutrición se instala durante los primeros 2 a 3 años de vida, y si no se previene, después es irreversible. El daño para el desarrollo cognitivo, el potencial productivo se ve afectado durante esos primeros años.
The first weapon in the fight to prevent such problems is to raise awareness, to inform.
¿Toma pecho? ¿Tu nena? Sí. ¿Sí? ¿Y por qué le das la pacha? Es muy difícil de limpiar y a veces les da enfermedades a los niños del estómago. Entonces es mejor que le des tu pecho y que le des sus comidas con cuchara. El vitacereal igual se lo puedes hacer, también solo para dárselo con cuchara.
Each month, Andrea receives 3 kilos of Vita cereal for each child. It's a mixture of maize and soy fortified with vitamins and minerals such as iron and zinc. In short, it has everything to compensate for deficiencies due to an unvaried diet. Like many Guatemalans, Andrea and her family's living conditions remain difficult. But thanks to the program, her children and thousands of others can at least hope to grow up normally. All over the world, from Zambia to Bangladesh, from Guatemala to Pakistan, from the Yemen to the Philippines, the Food Facility Program is working to fight food insecurity and to reduce poverty, and to improve over the long term the everyday lives of millions of the planet's most vulnerable inhabitants. In addition to the program, the EU spends 600 million euros on average per year for food and agricultural support. In an ever more globalized world, where the beating of a butterfly's wings can cause a hurricane on the other side of the world, it's our duty as Europeans, but it's also in our interest to help these populations living on borrowed time. It's a major challenge in a world where over 1 billion human beings suffer from hunger.